It's almost fantasy playoff time, so let's take a look at the wide receivers who could help you on your way to victory. We've been waiting months for this, so let's see which wide receivers I have in my top 10 during the fantasy playoffs. That's typically weeks 14 through 16. These guys could be the league winner that you're looking for. So let's start with number 10. I'm going to go with the guy, Cooper Kupp. That might be surprising because, again, his teammate also can do just as well, if not outproduce him. It just depends on the matchup, right? Which one is getting targeted most? Why am I leaning toward Kupp? If you look at the schedule, now both these receivers have a great schedule during the playoffs. They get the Patriots, who I know on paper you think that's a really tough matchup, good pass defense, but they're giving up the most yards per target to receivers, and they've given up several big games to wide receivers. So Cooper Kupp is going to do just fine in that game. I think Patriots also giving up a lot of points to slot receivers, and that's why I give the edge to Kupp. Then it gets the Jets and the Seahawks. Again, two of the worst pass defenses in the league. It's a great schedule. You have to have both Woods and Kupp in your lineup, but I'm giving the slight edge to Kupp. I think that he outproduces him. So going with him at number 10. Number 9, kind of a risky pick here, but Michale Thomas. Yeah, first round pick in a lot of fantasy drafts last year. Number 1 fantasy wide receiver, was a league winner. He's been a bust this year, but of course, a lot of that due to health. Now, with Drew Brees out of the lineup, we didn't know what would happen. So that's where the risk comes in. But so far, so good with Taysom Hill. The first start for Hill, Thomas came away surprisingly with 104 yards and 9 catches. This last game, not so much, only 4 catches for 50 yards, but that was a game flow situation going against a Denver team that literally did not have a quarterback. That game was handed to them. Basically, Saints didn't really have to do much at all, especially pass. There was no threat. So going to give him a pass on that. I think Thomas is really solid, wide receiver 1, as he should be going forward. Number 9 actually still feels low for him, a player of his caliber, but of course, with the whole quarterback situation, you have to knock him down a little bit because he's not getting into the end zone just yet. Number 8, I already mentioned Tyler Lockett, so I'm sticking with DK Metcalf. Why Metcalf over Lockett? Well, you might remember last year is when the turnaround happened where down the stretch, Tyler Lockett, aside from a big game here and there spread out, really kind of disappointed down the stretch, and it was Metcalf who started to emerge. I'm giving the edge to Metcalf. Of course, he's the bigger body. Of course, he's going to get more of the red zone work. Of course, he has the big play threat. They both are big play threats, but I really think Metcalf is going to be the guy going forward. We've seen him emerge. And again, the schedule here, talk about the Jets, week 14. There is a tough matchup with the Rams in week 16, and we know that he kind of flopped in that matchup the first time these two teams match. But I do feel like Metcalf is an every week must start, a top 10 receiver, regardless of matchup. Temper your expectations for week 16, but otherwise, he's locked in my top 10. And number 7, talk about a high floor. Terry McLaurin does not care who the quarterback is, but here's the good thing. With Alex Smith at quarterback, he really hasn't missed a beat. He's averaging 90 yards per game, in fact, with Smith at quarterback. He is a wide receiver 1 through and through. He's the leader in yards after the catch, and only one game all season that he's been under 4 receptions and 60 yards. That's a high floor. In week 15, he does get that Seattle secondary, so a great matchup there. He could be a top 5 finisher that week, and that's what you want to see in that all-important matchup. At number 6, a guy that you absolutely can never bench, as we've seen, even in terrible matchups like against Indianapolis or Baltimore. It doesn't matter. A.J. Brown doesn't care who's defending him. He is a must-start, and his schedule is actually pretty mouth-watering if you look at it from a fantasy standpoint. Week 14 through 16, he gets Jacksonville, Detroit, and Green Bay. All right, so he doesn't get much better than that, especially those first 2 matchups. He's also, of course, top 10 in yards after the catch, just like he was last year. You've seen what he can do with the ball in his hands. It doesn't matter. You start him, you set it and forget it, and he could very well be a top 5 receiver going down the stretch. But to start my top 5, let's go with a guy named Stefon Diggs. Only thing that keeps him out of the top 3, he just doesn't have quite the touchdown upside. Now, that could change with John Brown on IR. We could see more Diggs. That really didn't happen in this past week. We saw more Gabriel Davis come on. I don't expect that to be a trend going forward. Diggs is still the man there. The only thing is these next couple of receivers I'm going to mention do have the edge on him because of that. Number 4, guy who just really doesn't get enough respect. Some people don't even have him in their top 10 receivers, which is crazy, but Keenan Allen, number 4 might even be too low for him, but go with him at 4. He now currently leads the league in targets and receptions through week 11. And Justin Herbert, he's been great. He's probably going to win Offensive Rookie of the Year. Allen also gets targeted a ton in the all-important red zone, had 12 red zone receptions and top 10 in that category. So even though he's not the bigger bodied receiver, a guy like Metcalf is, he is somebody who's going to get work in the end zone and pay off with touchdowns, also with a high volume of receptions. So absolutely near the top of the heap. Before I finish with my top 3, don't forget to hit subscribe, guys. We have our top 10 running back rest of the season playoff picks. Also, catch the very latest by hitting that notification bell as well. All right, so number 3, coming off of week 12, you would think that, Tyreek Hill is just the best receiver in all of football. I don't know that we'll ever see a performance like that again. If you played against him, apologies, you lost. But Tyreek Hill, even before week 12, was second in fantasy points per game behind only, player I'm going to mention pretty soon, even though he didn't have a 100-yard game the whole first half of the season. Week 9 and 11, he went over 100 yards, but that means he's catching fire, and sure enough, the flames are real. In the second half of the season, he has arguably been the best fantasy wide receiver, so absolutely have him number 3. Week 16 gets a great matchup against Atlanta. He could wind up being that league winner, as he was the week winner just recently. Number 2, DeAndre Hopkins. He's been a little up and down lately. It's kind of hard to imagine that somebody who is arguably the most talented and best receiver in the game has had some down weeks, even with the season Kyler Murray has had. They've been a little game flow dependent on how much he gets targeted. And I feel like the schedule is going to help him out. That's why I give him the slight edge over Tyreek Hill. Does face the Rams twice down the stretch, but the good news is it's the week before and the week after your fantasy playoffs, week 13 and 17. So he avoids that. So it's a decent schedule. Not worried about him. The target share will be there. He has a touchdown upside. So Hopkins is your number 2 receiver. But number 1, of course, there's really no point arguing this. It's Davante Adams, who, had he played a full season, not missed those couple of games, could be on a historic pace in terms of fantasy points. He, heading into week 12, was leading all wide receivers with 17.8 fantasy points per game. The next closest was Hill, who has obviously caught up to him now. But here's the thing, Davante Adams, not just the leading receiver in fantasy going up to the playoffs. He gets Detroit in week 14. Can't get much better than that. And then Carolina and Kansas City next. Kansas City is going to be a tougher matchup, but that game has the potential to be a massive shootout. So you have to love Adams' chances of being targeted a ton. So Davante Adams, there is no doubt, he is the number 1 receiver through the fantasy playoffs. Hopefully you have one of these guys. If you have more than one, congratulations. If you have questions about who else might make that top 20, hit us up here with a comment. Let us know who you think should be in or maybe should be out of this top 10. Leave us a comment right here. And, of course, hit that subscribe button. We appreciate all your love. Thanks.